Thank you. We're beginning our hearing for today, Tuesday, January 19th. Welcome everyone to the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you to members, of course, and for certainly the public watching us today, and for those who will be testifying. We have a hearing on 14 bills today. As we'll say for the next week or so, please bear with us as we're conducting these hearings with not such a new technology, but trying to do hearings in this new way. If there's any change in times or any breaks, you will see a note on the screen where my name will otherwise be. If you're in the waiting room waiting to testify, please make sure your name matches the name you signed up with. Otherwise, we can't admit you because we don't know who you are. So we can only bring in the people who have signed up. Delegate Wilkins, House Bill 222.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. All right, here we go. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am pleased to present HB 222. For the record, I am State Delegate Janelle Wilkins. The foundation of this bill is that our democracy and election system should ensure that every single eligible voter has the opportunity and full access to the right to vote. Our election should not leave any voter behind. But there is one population in particular that is often shut out of voting, and that's our eligible incarcerated individuals. Most people who are incarcerated in jail have the right to vote. Many of them are pre-trial, they're awaiting their case or serving a misdemeanor and have the right to vote, but have limited access to the ability to vote. HB 222 does a few things. It ensures that upon release, incarcerated individuals are provided a voter registration application and also informed of their right to vote. It also ensures that those under the supervision of parole and probation also receive this information and have posted notice. And very importantly, for those who are incarcerated and who are eligible, it requires SBE to adopt regulations establishing a program to inform eligible voters of the upcoming elections and support their access to the ballot. The House did pass a version of this bill last year, and I want to thank colleagues for their support. It wasn't able to pass in the Senate prior to our abrupt adjournment last year. However, between this bill passing the House last year and the hearing today, we've had an historic election where once again, eligible incarcerated voters struggle to vote due to the current process and also because of the pandemic. We have a lot of very important lessons learned from the 2020 election that have informed the current bill and the associated amendments. During the election, without this bill in place, several of the individuals testifying that you're going to hear from actually worked to create a system and program to ensure the voting rights of incarcerated individuals. They visited correctional facilities, they held information sessions about the right to vote, they risked themselves during the pandemic to coordinate a voting access tour where they went to detention facilities to remind jail administrators of their duties and the rights of those inside. So what we learned is that there is a great need for this legislation. And more importantly, it's not enough to have a general voting policy in place. It's not enough to leave the correctional facilities to their own devices and just hope that they provide equal access to the ballot for incarcerated individuals who have just as much of a right to vote as you and I. From our lessons in 2020, the program really has to have strong leadership and collaboration with the State Board of Elections, with the correctional facilities, and with community organizations. We also have to ensure oversight and accountability. And finally, having a comprehensive program that ensures equal access to the ballot. As you all have seen, this has been a major issue all across the country. We're seeing more and more programs put in place. Even in the Cook County Jail in Chicago, it actually served as a primary election precinct for the first time due to their legislation. This is a national issue that we have the opportunity to make sure we pass in a robust way this year. So I want to thank the committee again for your passage of a version of this bill last year. I want to urge the lessons learned from the 2020 election that you're going to hear about from other panelists, and ask for your favorable report on this bill that is a reflection of what we've seen happen in practice. So thank you so much for your attention and time.
If members have questions for Delegate Wilkins, and I forgot to mention that the Judiciary Committee is second on this bill, so delegates Erican, Crutchfield, and Shetty are on here as well, and they are certainly free to ask, of course, to ask questions as well. Are there any questions for Delegate Wilkins? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll start with the people who've signed up, starting with Nicole Hansen Mundell.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for hearing this very important piece of legislation. For the record, my name is Nicole Hansen Mundell. I am the Executive Director of Out for Justice, a nonprofit-based organization whose mission is to educate, engage, and empower formerly and currently incarcerated citizens around the legislative process, and really showing them how to use this process to help to advance their successful reentry. We, of course, are here in support of House Bill 0222, primarily because this is an issue that not only affects my member base, but it affects me. It happened to me. I once was incarcerated a time ago and really desired the opportunity to cast my ballot because I knew that I was coming home one day, and I knew that what happens in my community impacts me and my children. The one thing I want to mention to you all is that you might not hear from our national partners, the Sentencing Project and the Campaign Legal Center, but their testimony is on the record, and they work with us all throughout the last election to ensure that individuals pre-trial had access to the ballot. Out for Justice was a part of the State Board of Elections subcommittee. They had a specific committee that would help to engage and inform them of what was happening on the ground. And at that time, we really had to apply some pressure and really advocate for ourselves that the law that currently exists had to be implemented. And, I want to, really say that this legislation is important because, we can pass laws all day, but if we are not ensuring that these laws are implemented, then it's almost like we're wasting our time. And we never want to waste the time of the Maryland General Assembly. Over this past election, we were able to do something very historical. We were able to push the state board to do something they had never done before, which is to engage the pretrial population and to invest funding into formerly and currently incarcerated people. And they did that. And even in their 2020 report, they acknowledged the work that they did. They acknowledged that they had never done it before, and they are in support of this legislation. We saw, you will find that there was some tweaks in the bill only because this specific group of people that you're going to hear from was able to actually implement the law, talk with wardens. We went into the jails in Howard County and Carroll County and registered men and women to vote. We submitted certain PIA requests to the Department of Corrections. We were able to put out flyers in the institutions, created hotlines. And so we actually was able to implement the very policy that we hope you all are able to pass this session, because it is increasingly important.
All right, thank you very much. We do have 9 people signed up, so I'll ask for questions after each 3 people. Things moving a little bit. The next person signed up to speak is Latasha Faison. I apologize.
Latasha was one of my members. I'm sorry, committee chair. She was one of my members and had some technical difficulties getting on. And her testimony would just be that she got out of prison, was eligible to vote, and she got this particular letter in the mail from the State Board of Elections telling her that she could not vote, when in fact we knew the law allowed her to vote. And so she had to go through contacting the state board. They in turn told her to write a letter stating that she was eligible. So there were some things that she had to go through, and we can only imagine thousands of people who this letter was generated during the last primary and general election, which is also a reason why this piece of legislation is so important, because we do not want to isolate eligible voters from having access to the ballot.
Okay.
So that would have been her testimony.
Thank you. Thank you. Next time we just say that she's not here. You can't testify twice. We do have a lot of people on this bill. Kaylin Young? Is Kaylin here?
I believe he submitted written testimony instead of oral, so I apologize for that, that discretion. You can move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Antoine?
Yes, Joanne Antoine again, for the record, testifying in support of House Bill 222. I know that we're limited on time. Delegate Wilkins and Nicole have already covered, a lot of the reasons why we need to ensure that eligible incarcerated Marylanders have meaningful access to the ballot in these facilities, and that they're made aware of their rights to vote upon release. I think, as mentioned by Nicole, during the general election, right, our coalition was able to partner with the state board to try and very quickly put together a process that would allow for those individuals to be able to vote in the election. I think all parties would agree that while it was great that we did it, that we need to eliminate the hurdles that we had to go through in order for the state board to get actual access to lists of eligible voters. We need to address the time in which it takes for ballots or other election related materials to make it through mail, both to and from the facility. And we need to work to ensure that these eligible incarcerated individuals have access to election officials, and that there's some oversight over this process. I won't go through all of the amendments, but we believe that they're necessary, right? The state board can't effectively, move forward with a program like this unless they receive these lists in a timely manner. Drop boxes would help eliminate a lot of the issues that we're experiencing with mail, and corrections staff working with us to help sort that mail, and ensure that the voter gets it within 2 days time period, and 2 days out helps ensure that voters ballots, and their registration forms are meeting these deadlines. And, things like the free call list, voters inside have no way of communicating with election officials if there's any issues, if they have questions about how they're filling out their forms, if they're facing any intimidation and so forth, right? And we want to ensure that there's a phone number on the free call list so that they can talk to someone. I know that I have no more time left. Our partners at ACLU did manage to, submit a PIA request, when we got information from corrections around the policy that they have in place. What we found was that a lot of the information that they were providing to voters was incorrect. Deadlines were wrong. The posters had incorrect information. So, having this ombuds position or some role that is dedicated within the state board to oversee this ensures that the process or the information being provided in these facilities, that they're actually accurate. So I hope that you all will, again, move forward with supporting this bill with these necessary amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. The next person we have signed up is Monica Cooper.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm going to try to wrap this up as quick as possible. Good afternoon, Chairman Kaiser. My name is Monica Cooper. I am a formerly incarcerated woman, and I'm also an elected official. I ran for the Democratic State Central Committee in the 40th District, and my peers decided that they wanted me to be a part of the leadership. If it had not been for my right to vote and the fact that my votes were restored to me, I would not be able to be some folks' colleagues. And I just wanted to stress how important it is that individuals who are incarcerated have access to the ballot. Currently, throughout the country, we see this shift and this move to ensure that every single vote counts. In such a polarized country where every single vote counts, I think it's very important that we make sure that all of those things that my colleagues mentioned are implemented. I personally, Maryland Justice Project, I'm the executive director. We went to all 24 counties in the state of Maryland. It was grueling. We went through every single one, and we knocked on each door of the detention center, Somerset County, Cecil County, Carroll County, to ensure that these things were in place. Because prior to the push that we've had this past general election, these things weren't in place. It was people, men and women, who were able to vote for some of you guys. Some of those votes from Towson Detention Center, from Somerset Detention Center, and from detention centers across the state actually went to some of you guys that's sitting on this panel today. So I would just encourage a favorable vote for HB 222 because it's the right thing to do. Maryland has been a trendsetter. Maryland has set the bar high when it comes to granting everybody access to the ballot. And I am hoping that you guys would continue that trend. Every single vote count. It's the person's right. Just because you have gotten a pickle does not mean you lose your right to vote. And the last thing I want to say is, as an elected official, I cannot tell you how relieved I was that my dear Maryland would allow me to not only vote as a returning citizen, but also be a representative. And the people who I represent in the 40th district, they are just super excited to see formerly incarcerated people not only vote, but also be on the ballot. I can't tell you how important it is. Thank you very much.
All right. Is there also a Kadeem Cooper here? Okay. Next on the list, Mark.
Chairwoman Kaiser, I'm Marcia Johnson Blanco with the Lawyers Committee. Kadeem Cooper signed up on my behalf.
Okay, please go.
Thank you. Chairwoman Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the Value My Vote Act HB 222. My name is Marcia Johnson Blanco, and I co-direct the Voting Rights Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, a national nonpartisan civil rights nonprofit founded by President John Kennedy. And I also oversee the work of Election Protection, the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection program. I'm also a Maryland resident. We strongly urge passage of HB 222 by this committee and the Maryland General Assembly. This legislation addresses a glaring need. Individuals in jail are often de facto disenfranchised by state and local officials because they are prevented from accessing registration or absentee ballot materials or provided misinformation about their eligibility to vote while in jail. This legislation would ensure that the state of Maryland exercises its constitutional duty. Individuals incarcerated in jails in Maryland are often eligible and are denied the right to have their voices heard in the electoral process. Those individuals may be awaiting trial or serving time for a misdemeanor. And HB 222 ensures that these citizens can make their voices heard in the democratic process. By passing the Value My Vote Act, Maryland would join a growing list of jurisdictions that are taking steps to address the de facto disenfranchisement of eligible voters in jail. These jurisdictions, including Chicago, Denver, Houston, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia, and the District of Columbia, have taken affirmative steps to ensure voters have the means they need to register and cast ballots. Additionally, several states have adopted reforms like those proposed in the Value My Vote Act. In Colorado, for example, the Secretary of State requires county clerks to submit a plan developed with county sheriffs on how eligible incarcerated persons will be able to register and vote from jail. Other states like Illinois and California have enacted provisions which require state and local officials to provide information about registering to vote to individuals upon release from incarceration. The Maryland General Assembly should pass the Value My Vote Act and join the movement to protect the voting rights of incarcerated individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person signed up is Janet Millinson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Janet Millinson, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Maryland. The League supports the Value My Vote Act because we support an election system that's equitable, that's accessible, and that increases voter participation. We also supported the legislation that, as of the 2016 election, restored voting rights to felons who have served their sentence and to non-felons who are currently incarcerated, such as people in jail awaiting trial. However, restoring the right to vote isn't the same as enabling people to exercise that right. It's like sending someone a gift card when they have no way to redeem it. That's why this bill is so important. Prisoners generally don't have a convenient way to register to vote or to apply for a mail-in ballot. It's hard for them to get detailed information about the candidates who are running or the issues that are on the ballot. The League spent a lot of time and energy working to deliver our nonpartisan voters' guides to eligible voters behind bars before the recent general election. But volunteer efforts can only go so far. This bill requires correctional facilities to give people who are being released a voter registration application, along with written notification that their voting rights have been restored. For people who are eligible to vote but are still incarcerated, the facility must work with the state or local board of elections to provide opportunities to register and to vote securely. Voting makes people feel they have a stake in their community. When we make it easier for eligible incarcerated and recently released Marylanders to exercise their voting rights, it shows their community has a stake in them too. Therefore, the League of Women Voters of Maryland urges you to pass House Bill 222, the Value My Vote Act. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Ms. Demowitz. Sorry for messing that name up.
Hey, it's Christy Demowitz. Thank you, Vice Chair Washington, Chair Kaiser, members of the committee. There's not a lot for me to say that hasn't been said by Delegate Wilkins and Joanne and Nicole and Monica and other witnesses, but we just want to add our support to this bill. Again, I'm representing Represent Maryland, a nonpartisan pro-democracy group, and we have members all across the state. We work on a number of different pro-democracy solutions, and one of them is ending voter suppression. So our position is basically that if people who are currently incarcerated legally have the right to vote, but don't have access or are given incorrect information, that is absolutely a form of voter suppression. And if the Maryland General Assembly believes that voter suppression is bad, then we need to do everything we can to fix it. And that starts by passing the Value My Vote Act. We haven't engaged on this issue as nearly as much as other people who have testified have. And so I think it's a testament to how important this is to hear from somebody like Monica or Nicole about the work that they've done in detention centers to go in and actually get people registered and, you know, make sure they cast their votes. But it shouldn't be their responsibility. It should be the responsibility of the state government to make sure that people who legally have the right to vote are given access. And so I don't know how much more I can say about this other than I hope anyone who believes that Maryland should operate in a democratic way where everybody who legally can vote has the access and matters, is given the opportunity. I hope that you will find that this is an important bill to pass and find it favorable. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more witness, and then we'll take questions from our members. Miss Williams, Crystal Williams, you're here.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. My name is Crystal Williams, and I would like to take the time to properly introduce myself as well to all members of the committee who I have not yet had the chance to meet as the new Director of the Government Relations for the Office of the Public Defender. So I'm coming into this position as a line attorney in Baltimore City, where I work with youthful defendant in the youthful defendant unit representing children charged as adults. I'm here today on behalf of the Public Defender's Office to offer testimony in strong support of House Bill 222. This is an admirable and necessary bill that would ensure that disenfranchised individuals in Maryland have access to our most sacred hallmark to our nation's democracy, and that is making one's voice heard through the power of voting. Importantly, this bill would help educate and elevate highly marginalized and actively suppressed voice of Black men and women who historically lack in presence and representation at the polls and in the electoral process of obtaining reflective representation across all facets of government. Sadly, Maryland leads the nation in incarcerating young Black men. In 2019, the Justice Policy Institute found that more than 70% of all people in Maryland's prisons, that is double the national average, are Black. As a young law student years ago, I spent a considerable amount of time studying the history of many disenfranchisement laws across the country and found that there is a direct lineage to many disenfranchisement laws that plague Black and Brown communities to this day were rooted in means to suppress racial and economic diversity. Thankfully, great strides are being made with the most egregious of those laws, felony disenfranchisement laws. Now, whether laws can be directly traced to systematic efforts to silence masses of voices or can be seen to have de facto impacts of silencing masses of voices, it is up to all of us to make necessary changes to ensure that all voices are represented and heard through our local, state, and federal voting processes. Maryland is taking those steps and critical actions to ensure access to voting for those previously disenfranchised. Thankfully, in 2016, Maryland in particular ended voter disenfranchisement by passing a law that restored the voting rights of formerly incarcerated individuals. This bill would continue the work that has already begun. All eligible voters should be properly educated and provided with appropriate resources and unhindered access to exercise their right to vote. Yet there is broad misunderstanding and misinformation amongst jails and prison officials, and especially amongst incarcerated persons themselves regarding their right to vote as an incarcerated person. In Maryland, individuals who are incarcerated pending trial or those who only have been convicted of a misdemeanor are eligible to vote. This bill would address the lack of education and access for those groups of eligible voters, and it would help require Department of Corrections to take an active role in ensuring that this typically disenfranchised group would get the level of education and attention that is necessary to begin to combat years of misinformation. And so I want to thank Delegate Wilkins for putting forth this bill, and to all members who continue to support this critically necessary effort to eliminate barriers for disenfranchised individuals in Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you to Delegate Wilkins for bringing forth the bill. I just had a couple of clarifying questions, particularly for those that were out registering and facilitating, giving assistance to people who were voting. You did speak generally to it being, taxing and grueling and a tedious process, but could you tease out some specific examples of what those challenges and barriers looked like as you attempted to register and or facilitate someone voting?
Well, I can say as the person who actually drove a van throughout the state that some facilities weren't really receptive. When I showed up at the door to say, hey, by now, you should have received this packet in the mail, and we're just here following up to make sure that the persons here that's housed here have their voter registration and that they receive ballots. Some of them weren't really that receptive. And I know that we had called, we emailed, we made personal visits. We went through 4 or 5 weeks. We almost wanted to send homing pigeons. We had to go through great lengths to make sure that the 756 people that registered to vote out Towson, that they were able to vote. So it was really taxing. I can't even begin to tell you how taxing it was to have to go throughout the entire state just to get that last little bit of assurance that during the general election that all votes counted.
And Delegate Stephanie, on the administrative side, what we found were the challenges were, one, the State Board of Election kind of didn't really have a clue in the beginning of a how to, right? So what we found was challenging was that Joanne, myself, and Amy at the ACLU had to literally compile a packet for the State Board of Elections that would be distributed. So those packets that went out was developed by us. We had to think about how would individuals who can't read and write receive this packet. We had to come up with things like infographics to include in the packet, right? So that was the one hurdle in terms of kind of getting the state board to kind of get a visual of what this could look like. The other thing that we found on the administrative side is when the state board finally agreed after meeting, when they finally agreed that they would do this, they specifically asked Out for Justice, well, where are the lists? How do we know who is eligible? And so Out for Justice had to go and contact local wardens across the state. We contacted 7 jurisdictions, Howard County, Baltimore County, Carroll County, some other counties, Wamaco County, and the like. And we were able to send the State Board of Elections the list of all of those counties and the list of eligible voters. These are people pre-trial, not yet convicted of anything, but also misdemeanors, right? Individuals who had misdemeanor convictions. And this is just the law, right? And so that was a huge challenge of putting together those packets for the state board, waiting for the state board to go into procurement to approve the funding for these packets to be distributed, contacting the local jails to find out if they gotten them, right? You know, advocating for the state board to include pre-page postage because everybody in our prisons and jails don't have money for that. And then ensuring that the packets were delivered, reaching out to the local boards of elections, because remember, the State Board of Elections kind of give the locals the autonomy to decide the things that they want to do. So some local boards of elections, one, did not even know the law existed, right? So we had to do additional education to the actual agencies, the local agencies, to say, hey, this is the law. But then to ask them, hey, could you at least look out for the mail that's coming from the jails to help us to compile, you know, some data? So there were a lot of challenges. And lastly, the Department of Corrections created a voting policy kind of early September. But like Joanne said, when they finally reported what they actually did, everything was inaccurate. And so we couldn't fathom the fact that you just put out a policy in September, and we knew we were having issues with trying to navigate getting people in information, and they just report that we did this great thing, which kind of stopped them from engaging with the advocacy groups who wanted to assist them, right? So that, you know, your senator had to send a letter specifically to the detention center in Baltimore to say, hey, I want you all to, you know, do this thing. So those were just kind of some of the challenges, and we don't have enough time to just.
I'd also just add one more big one.
Hey everybody. Hey, we're gonna do one last comment, but I think the question was answered though. Okay.
Just one more that I think is important to raise.
Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
It's one thing to get voting materials inside, the ballot inside, and then we ran into issues getting voter education, nonpartisan voter education materials in there, right? So average everyday voters, you know, outside of the candidates, they've got information on things like ballot measures, right? The League of Women Voters, we were trying to get their guides into these facilities. Every facility wanted to tell us that it was contraband, right? So that was another hurdle as well, getting the ballot into the voter's hand, but also educating that voter on what's actually on their ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence, and thank you to all of you for that work that obviously if you didn't do, there are people who wouldn't have been able to vote. So thank you for all of your work. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And are there any other questions? I don't see any hands up or no one in the chat. Okay, with that said, that concludes the public hearing on this bill. We'll next go